When speaking about dealing with negative thoughts, it is essential to understand that awareness is the foundation upon which everything else is built. If we cannot see what is happening within us, how can we ever hope to influence it? Awareness means to turn your attention inward, to observe what is taking place in the mind without rushing to fix it, without suppressing it, and without exaggerating it. It is the art of noticing. Most people live in a constant stream of thoughts, and yet they remain unaware of them, as if carried by a river without ever realizing they are being swept away. Awareness is when you step out of the current, even for a moment, and simply watch how the water flows. Negative thoughts arise in every human being. They are not a mistake and they are not a weakness. They are a natural part of the mind's activity. But the problem begins when we are no longer aware that these thoughts have taken hold of us. Imagine you are sitting quietly and suddenly a memory comes, a mistake, a failure, or a painful event. Immediately, the mind attaches itself to this memory and begins building stories around it. You start hearing the voice in your head saying, "I am not good enough. I always fail. Things never work out for me." If you are unaware, you believe these words. You treat them as truth, and they begin to shape how you feel and how you act. Awareness changes this. When awareness is present, the same memory may arise, but instead of falling into it, you recognize this is a thought, this is a memory. You see it without judgment. You don't have to fight it, and you don't have to accept it as truth. You stand as the witness, and in that moment, you are free from being controlled by it. The thought may still exist, but it no longer owns you. Awareness requires stillness. In modern life, people are constantly distracted. Noise from technology, conversations, responsibilities. All of these keep the mind busy. A busy mind has no space to notice what is happening within. That is why practices like meditation, mindful breathing, or even simple pauses throughout the day are so valuable. When you stop, breathe, and pay attention, you give yourself the chance to see your inner landscape clearly. This seeing is awareness. Another important aspect of awareness is non-judgment. Many people, when they finally notice their negative thoughts, immediately criticize themselves. Why am I thinking this way? I should not feel like this. But this is just another layer of negativity. True awareness is gentle. It does not attack the thought, nor does it attack the thinker. It simply observes, like watching clouds move across the sky. You let them pass without labeling them as good or bad. This attitude of acceptance allows the mind to relax, and in relaxation, the grip of negativity weakens. Awareness is also closely linked with the body. The body often reacts before the mind fully notices. You may feel tension in your shoulders, a tightness in your chest, or a knot in your stomach when a negative thought arises. By cultivating awareness of the body, you can catch the presence of negativity even before it becomes a heavy storm in the mind. When you sense this, you can take a breath, adjust your posture, or simply acknowledge something is here. That small act of recognition already prevents the thought from taking deeper root. Through awareness, you also begin to see patterns. You notice that certain thoughts appear again and again. Maybe they always arise when you are tired, when you are alone, or when you face a challenge. By recognizing these patterns, you gain insight into the habits of your mind. And with insight comes the ability to respond differently. Without awareness, you repeat the same cycle endlessly. With awareness, you step out of the cycle and begin to walk a new path. Awareness is not something you achieve once and then keep forever. It is a continuous practice. Every moment is a new opportunity to be aware. Some days it will feel easy, other days it will feel difficult. But with persistence, awareness grows stronger. Slowly, you find that you are no longer drowning in negative thoughts. Instead, you are standing on the shore watching them pass by. The thoughts remain, but their power over you diminishes because you see them for what they are, temporary visitors in the vast space of your mind. Once awareness is established, the next step is to understand the relationship you have with your thoughts. Most people live their lives fully identified with whatever arises in their minds. When a thought appears, they immediately assume it is real, it is true, and it belongs to them. But this identification is the root of suffering. To detach from identification means to recognize that your thoughts are not you. They are simply experiences moving through you. Consider this carefully. The mind is constantly producing thoughts, just as the heart is beating or the lungs are breathing. It is natural function. Thoughts arise spontaneously, and yet people take them so personally. A passing thought of anger appears, and suddenly the person says, "I am angry." A thought of doubt arises, and the person concludes, "I am weak." But in reality, these are not who you are. They are mental events, temporary expressions that come and go. By identifying with them, you give them more weight than they deserve. Detachment begins when you create a small space between yourself and the thought. You do not merge with it, and you do not push it away. You simply observe it as something separate from your true nature. Imagine sitting by the side of a road. Cars are constantly passing. Some are loud, some are slow, some are fast. You can see them, you can hear them, but you are not the car. You are simply the observer on the side of the road. Your thoughts are the cars, and you are the awareness that notices them. When you forget this, you jump into the car and are taken wherever it drives. When you remember, you remain seated still and untouched. This practice of detachment requires you to shift your sense of self. Instead of saying, "I am my thoughts," you begin to realize, "I am the one who sees the thoughts." This change in perspective is powerful. Suddenly, you no longer have to believe every story your mind tells. A thought says, "You cannot succeed." If you are identified, you accept it and act as if it is true. If you are detached, you recognize, this is just a thought. You may still hear it, but you are not bound by it. You remain free to choose another action. Many people fear detachment because they think it means to stop caring or to become empty inside. But this is not the case. Detachment is not indifference, it is clarity. It means you care deeply about life, but you do not confuse passing mental noise with your true being. In fact, when you detach from identification, you gain more freedom to act with compassion and strength because you are no longer trapped in a cycle of self-doubt, fear, or anger created by thoughts. The practice of detachment can also be supported by observing nature. Look at the sky. Birds fly across it. Clouds drift. Storms may come, but the sky remains unchanged. Your mind is like this sky. Thoughts are like the birds and the clouds. They move, they shift, they disappear. But the vast openness of awareness never changes. When you identify with the thought, you mistake yourself for the cloud. When you detach, you realize you are the sky itself. Detachment also becomes clearer when you notice how thoughts contradict each other. One day the mind says, "You are strong." The next day it says, "You are weak." If you are truly your thoughts, how could they change so quickly? Their inconsistency is proof that they are not your essence. They are only passing impressions shaped by mood, memory, and environment. To detach is to see this clearly and to stop chasing after their unstable voices. A useful way to practice is through language. Instead of saying, "I am sad," try saying, "I notice sadness is present." This subtle shift already creates distance. The sadness may still be there, but you are not fully entangled with it. You are the one noticing it. and that noticing is your freedom. Detachment from identification is not about suppressing or denying thoughts. It is about reclaiming your position as the observer, the witness, the awareness behind them. The thought may shout, whisper, or echo, but when you remain unattached, its power fades. It no longer defines you, and it no longer dictates your actions. Awareness and detachment open the door, but the journey does not end with simply observing and separating from negative thoughts. Once you begin to see clearly that thoughts are not your identity, and once you are no longer fully entangled with them, the next natural step is transformation. Transformation is not accidental. It requires practice, consistency, and a conscious decision to train the mind toward a healthier, more constructive direction. Without practice, the old patterns of negativity return again and again because the mind always seeks the familiar. Through practice, you teach the mind new pathways, and over time, these pathways grow stronger than the old ones. To transform negative thoughts, you must first recognize that every thought carries energy. A negative thought drains you, weakens your spirit, and clouds your judgment. A constructive thought, on the other hand, uplifts you, sharpens your focus, and strengthens your resolve. Transformation is the art of shifting the energy of the mind from destructive patterns to constructive ones. This shift does not happen once. It happens every day with every thought that you choose to respond to in a new way. Consider what happens when someone faces failure. The untrained mind immediately generates negative commentary. I failed, I am useless, I will never improve. These thoughts arrive automatically because they are conditioned by past experiences. But through practice, you can begin to intervene. You notice the thought, you detach from it, and then you transform it by replacing it with a new perspective. I failed, but failure is a lesson. I can grow from this experience. This moment does not define me. In the beginning, this replacement feels unnatural because the negative voice is louder and more familiar. But with repeated practice, the constructive voice becomes stronger until it eventually becomes the natural response. Transformation through practice is very similar to training the body. If you have never exercised, the body feels heavy and resistant. But the more you train, the more fluid, strong, and coordinated the body becomes. The mind is no different. At first, negative thoughts dominate because the mental muscles of awareness, detachment, and replacement are weak. But with practice, these muscles grow. Eventually, the mind develops resilience, and negative thoughts no longer have the same control as before. One effective practice is the cultivation of gratitude. Gratitude directly transforms negative energy into positive energy. When the mind is stuck in complaint, comparison, or self-pity, gratitude redirects attention to what is already present and valuable. It shifts the focus from lack to abundance. Practicing gratitude daily, even for small things like a breath of fresh air, a meal, or the presence of a loved one, trains the mind to naturally look for what is supportive instead of what is harmful. Over time, gratitude becomes a shield against negativity because it prevents the mind from drowning in dissatisfaction. Another practice for transformation is conscious speech. The words you speak shape the thoughts you reinforce. When you speak negatively about yourself or others, you are strengthening the negative patterns within the mind. But when you practice speaking with intention, using words of encouragement, clarity, and kindness, you are guiding your mind toward a more constructive direction. Speech becomes both the mirror and the training ground of thought. It is also important to remember that transformation is not about forcing positivity in an artificial way. It is not about denying the existence of pain or pretending that everything is perfect. It is about shifting perspective so that even in difficulty, the mind looks for growth, for possibility and for meaning. Pain may exist, but suffering arises from how we interpret and respond to that pain. Through practice, the interpretation changes and suffering loses its grip. Consistency is the heart of transformation. A single moment of positive thinking cannot dissolve years of negative conditioning. But daily practice, even in small doses, creates gradual but lasting change. Each time you choose to transform a negative thought into a constructive one, you are strengthening a new habit. And just as water, drop by drop, carves a path through stone, so does consistent practice carve a path of clarity through the mind. Transformation also benefits from discipline in physical practice. Training the body, whether through martial arts, meditation, or mindful movement, helps to align the mind. A disciplined body creates a disciplined mind. When you maintain posture, breath, and movement with awareness, you are training yourself to stay present, to resist distraction, and to respond with calmness instead of reactivity. This physical practice reinforces the mental practice, creating a balanced and stable foundation for transformation. Ultimately, transformation through practice is about reclaiming authorship of your own mind. It is the realization that you are not condemned to repeat the same cycles of negativity forever. With awareness, detachment, and daily training, you reshape the very patterns that once controlled you. The mind becomes a tool that serves you rather than a master that enslaves you. The relationship between body and mind is far deeper than most people realize. When the body is restless, weak, or undisciplined, the mind tends to mirror these same qualities. Thoughts become scattered, emotions become unstable, and focus slips away easily. On the other hand, when the body is steady, strong, and trained, the mind naturally begins to follow that same order. This is why training the body is not only about physical health, but also about cultivating inner stability and clarity. To deal with negative thoughts, it is not enough to only sit and reflect. The body must also be trained, because the body and mind are two reflections of the same essence when you engage in physical practice. Whether it is martial arts, yoga, mindful walking, or even simple breath work, you are giving the mind a structure. The body becomes the anchor, and the mind, which is usually like a wild horse, begins to settle into rhythm and discipline. For example, focusing on your breath during physical exercise connects the movements of the body with the awareness of the mind. This connection reduces mental noise. Instead of being lost in endless streams of thought, you are drawn into presence. In this presence, negative thoughts lose their grip because the mind is no longer wandering aimlessly into past regrets or future fears. Training the body also teaches patience. When you start a physical practice, progress is rarely immediate. Muscles resist, flexibility feels limited, balance is unsteady, but with repetition, strength builds and movements become smoother. This same patience is required in dealing with the mind. Negative thoughts do not disappear overnight. They require steady training, consistent effort, and the willingness to endure discomfort in the beginning stages. The discipline you build in the body becomes a mirror for how you deal with the struggles of the mind. There is also wisdom in physical exhaustion. When the body is fully engaged in training, when sweat flows and muscles burn, the mind often becomes quiet. This is because the body draws so much energy into the present moment that the mind has no room to wander into unnecessary negativity. Many people find that after exercise, their thoughts are clearer, lighter, and more manageable. This is not a coincidence. The body, once disciplined, creates a calm environment for the mind to rest in. Another aspect is posture. The way you hold your body influences the state of your mind. A slouched back and a closed chest invite feelings of defeat and heaviness, while an upright posture with open shoulders communicate strength and resilience, not only to others, but also to yourself. The body sends signals to the mind, and the mind responds accordingly. By consciously training your body to move, breathe, and hold itself with awareness, you are directly influencing the quality of your thoughts. Training the body also develops resilience to discomfort. When you stretch beyond your limits, hold a stance longer than feels comfortable, or push through fatigue, you are teaching yourself that discomfort is not an enemy. The same principle applies to negative thoughts. They may feel uncomfortable, but through mental training, inspired by physical discipline, you learn not to run away from them, but to face them calmly and with endurance. Just as the body adapts and grows stronger through physical challenge, the mind adapts and grows stronger through facing its own difficulties. Breath is one of the most profound bridges between body and mind. When the breath is shallow and rapid, the mind reflects agitation and fear. When the breath is deep and steady, the mind reflects calmness and clarity. This is why many traditions emphasize breathing exercises. By training the body to breathe with awareness, you are not only calming physical tension, but also guiding the mind out of chaotic thinking. The breath becomes a tool of transformation, a way to shift from a state of negativity to a state of centeredness. There is also an element of ritual in training the body. Setting aside time each day to move with discipline and awareness creates a rhythm for both body and mind. This rhythm prevents chaos from dominating your inner world. Just as the sun rises and sets with order, your body and mind begin to function with more stability when you maintain a regular practice. Over time, this rhythm strengthens your ability to deal with negative thoughts because the mind learns to operate within a framework of balance instead of unpredictability. In many ways, training the body is like forging a vessel. The body is the container and the mind is the content. If the container is weak, the content spills and scatters. But if the container is strong, steady, and well crafted, the content remains safe, structured, and useful. In the same way, when your body is disciplined through regular practice, your mind has a stable home to rest in, and negative thoughts find less space to grow unchecked. After awareness, detachment, transformation, and training of the body, there comes a deeper stage that unifies everything, returning to silence. Silence is not only the absence of sound, it is the stillness within, where the constant chatter of the mind no longer controls your attention. To deal with negative thoughts, silence is not about pushing them away, but about giving yourself the space where they no longer disturb you. Silence is the natural state of the mind when it is free from clinging, and this silence can be rediscovered when you consciously choose to return to it. In daily life, the mind is continuously occupied. Thoughts about the past, worries about the future, comparisons, judgments, expectations, all of these create a noise that drowns out the quiet presence already within you. Negative thoughts grow stronger in this noise because they feed on confusion and restlessness. But when you begin to practice silence, even for a few moments, you create a gap. In that gap, the thought loses its power because silence is more vast than any single thought. The noise of the mind may continue, but you are no longer carried away. You stand in the silence and watch. Silence does not mean escape. It is not about running away from life, isolating yourself, or avoiding responsibility. True silence is discovered in the midst of life itself. You may be surrounded by people, by sounds, by activity, and yet within you there is a still point that remains untouched. This is the silence that allows clarity to appear. When clarity comes, negative thoughts are seen for what they are: temporary, fleeting, and powerless compared to the depth of inner stillness. Returning to silence can be cultivated through simple practices. Sitting quietly and focusing on the breath is one way. As the breath flows in and out, the body begins to relax and the mind slowly quiets. Thoughts may still appear, but instead of following them, you return to the rhythm of the breath. Each time you return, you strengthen your connection to silence. Over time, the gaps between thoughts grow longer and the silence becomes more familiar than the noise. Walking in nature is another doorway into silence. When you walk without rushing, when you listen to the sound of leaves, the flow of water, or the rhythm of your own steps, the mind softens. In these moments, the silence of the natural world teaches you to find the same silence within yourself. Nature does not resist, and in its presence, your thoughts no longer seem so urgent. The negative thoughts that once felt overwhelming become smaller against the vastness of silence reflected in the world around you. Silence is also a form of strength. Many people believe that strength comes from action, from speaking, from doing. But true strength often arises from restraint, from holding still, from not reacting impulsively. When a negative thought appears, silence gives you the power not to react immediately. You do not need to respond with words, with further thoughts, or with emotional outbursts. You wait, you breathe. In the silence, the energy of the thought dissolves on its own. This ability to remain silent in the face of inner turmoil is a profound discipline, and it grows with practice. There is a healing quality in silence. The mind, when constantly active, becomes exhausted. Just as the body needs sleep to recover, the mind needs silence to restore balance. When you rest in silence, even for a short period, you give the mind the chance to cleanse itself. The weight of accumulated thoughts lightens, and what remains is clarity and calmness. This is why after moments of silence, you often feel renewed, as if a burden has been lifted. Silence also connects you to a deeper sense of self. Without silence, you only know yourself through thoughts, emotions, and roles. But when these settle into stillness, something else is revealed, a presence that does not depend on what you think or what you feel. This presence is not touched by negativity because it exists beyond the fluctuations of the mind. Returning to silence allows you to experience this deeper presence directly, and once you touch it, you realize that negative thoughts are only surface level movements, like ripples on a vast ocean. Returning to silence is not about achieving something new, it is about remembering what is always there. Beneath the noise, beneath the constant activity of the mind, silence has always been present. It is the background against which every thought appears. To return to silence is to shift your attention away from the fleeting shapes on the surface and back to the vastness underneath. With practice, you no longer need to force silence. It arises naturally because it is your original state. Dealing with negative thoughts is not about erasing them, nor is it about fighting them with force. It is about learning to see them, to step back from them, to transform them, and to train both body and mind until silence becomes your natural refuge. Awareness shows you the presence of these thoughts. Detachment reminds you that you are not defined by them. Practice gives you the strength to shape them into something constructive. The training of the body brings stability to the mind, and silence reveals the clarity that was always within you. In this way, negative thoughts lose their power. They may still appear, but they no longer control your life. Instead, you stand with steadiness, clarity, and freedom, able to choose your response with wisdom and strength.